Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. My guest is Tim Winfrey, and we are going to talk about making a business partnership work, one that stands the test of time. So Tim co-hosts the Freedom Chasers podcast, and that's how we met, actually, is through their podcast. He has a very interesting background and a very interesting role in the companies. And I want to dive into that. Tim is a real estate broker, a marketer, and a BPO expert. He has completed over 100 fix and flip projects, and he's managed the repairs on an additional 50 plus REO homes. He currently manages a team of 5 agents as the broker owner of First Class Real Estate of Great Lakes. Kind of sounds like Superman, right? So welcome to the show, Tim.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate the compliments. It sounds great, but I think most entrepreneurs, we feel like we're not where we want to be too. So
yeah. Oh yeah. We're all that, we have that, a lot of things that surround us where we feel like we never quite measure up, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about something that I get a lot of questions, and I see a lot of mistakes made when it comes to business partnerships. And this is something that you have done successfully. So you can put together a business partnership, but becoming partners and staying successful business partners, that's 2 different things. But before we dive into that, I want to have everybody tell a little bit more about your background.
Absolutely. So I'm second generation. So my father's been selling houses since 1984. I've been kind of ingrained with the business since birth, essentially. So basically single father when I was a young child. So, I spent a lot of time with him on showing appointments and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun kind of getting introduced to the industry. And once I got my license in like 2011, I actually started helping him a lot with the fix and flips that he was working on. So I was actually doing a lot of the blue collar work. I essentially could do most of it now, except for plumbing. And that's a choice because plumbing is nasty. So
Yes, it is.
Me and him worked on a ton of fix and flip projects together, excuse me. And on the side, I was doing these BPOs. And that particular mixture of skills kind of opened up an awesome opportunity for me in the REO world, because I was working on managing rehab projects and I was pricing properties, right? So, I just kind of slid in with an REO broker here that was pounding out a ton of units, and I did all the repairs and the valuations for them. And we were selling hundreds of units per year. And eventually from there, I transitioned back to working with my old man. So we kind of worked as a team for a couple years. And then I bought my brokerage last July. So, that's kind of quick and dirty,
Okay.
I suppose.
Let's back up just a little bit for folks that might not understand the terms REO and BPO. Let's explain those just a little bit so that they're not thinking, well, wait a minute, what the heck is that?
Okay, so a BPO is a broker price opinion. It is very, very similar to an appraisal. So, basically, if you look at it, it'll look exactly like an appraisal. The only difference is it is performed by a real estate broker as opposed to a licensed appraiser. And the reason banks use it is because they pay much less money, basically.
Yeah. And REO.
REO stands for real estate owned, which basically just means it's a foreclosed property.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that kind of sets the tone here for that. There's a lot of realtors do BPOs. They do that as a kind of a side gig.
Absolutely. I still have my BPO business running. Actually, we do pretty well. It covers most of my overhead, the BPOs by themselves.
So I want to talk about business partners. Now, I know that you have a business partner, and he was going to be on the show today, but he's not feeling well. So let's talk about how this came about with you and your business partner.
Absolutely. So my business partner is Matt Kavanaugh. He's a real estate broker. He's actually licensed. I believe he's licensed in 10 states, but he's active in 8, if I recall correctly. I actually met him because I reached out to him to coach to me originally. So, I was actually paying him monthly just to get his expert advice. But I ended up just striking a friendship with him. I found a sweet deal in my area. I think he made like $220,000 in equity, and there's like
Oh,
$11,000 in contract rents.
wow.
So that kind of really sparked the relationship up. And I've been managing those properties for him. And the friendship just kind of bloomed from there. That's kind of where it started, though. That's where the roots came from.
So it wasn't like a planned thing. You were first friends, you were first associates in a different way. So what made you become business partners though? Did he suggest it? Was there some kind of an equitable thing you all decided on, or how did that come about?
Great question. So, I believe, from my point of view, at least, we have a very complementary skill set. So, like, Matt is one of the best salesmen in the country, probably. And I have the same type of skill set and the marketing aspect. So, we're very good counterbalances to each other. Like the natural tendencies that we have just really align very well together. So, we've been looking for opportunities to work together um, pretty much over the last 18 months. And I think we found like the perfect one with the podcast.
I think that is so interesting that you didn't just set out to find a business partner. It just kind of happened. And I've heard that story from several different people that they started out with one relationship, but they ended up being partners. And I think you have to set things in place before you ever become business partners. You have to have, before you ever actually have a single day in business, you have to determine that you have the same goals, company vision, same ethics for sure. What about the mission statement? And also, let's talk about an exit strategy. Like in a partnership agreement, it's kind of like a prenup, or kind of like the day you get married. You have to, ideally, when there's going to be money involved, like there is in a business partnership, you would have a way to enter that partnership, but also a way to exit it, whether that was selling the company. One person wants to sell, one doesn't, or for some reason you decide not to become partners. How does all of that come about? Did you all sit down and talk that through, or maybe a little bit at a time, or how did that work out?
Of course. And it's a fluid conversation too, because if you're an entrepreneur, new opportunities arise all the time. And being able to make sure that everybody is being able to win in the equation is very important. I think it's very important that you know your partner very well. You don't just want to jump into business with somebody you don't know super well. Like me and Matt have had a relationship for several years now. I know he's a very high integrity person, and he knows the same thing for me. So, it was very easy to ease into that relationship because we already established a relationship and we have ideas of our characteristics and things of that nature. One of the things you mentioned, like I believe it was Gary Keller, when you enter a business agreement with somebody or a business relationship, one of the first conversations you should have is like what type of disagreements you guys could come up with, so you could try to hash that out on the front end. So we have had all those conversations and like which way to best structure it so that everybody continues to be happy. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Did you all talk specifically about long-term goals and your vision for your business, the two of you?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do have a finite 12-month plan right now for the
Mhm.
podcast, where
Mhm.
we're going to be extremely aggressive in producing content and things of that nature, and ways to monetize the content. That's a little bit more fluid. We have a lot of ideas out there, but there's nothing quite concrete yet. I think building the audience is the hardest part. And basically, if we could just give the audience what they want, we could have a successful product for them. So, we're basically doing the what they call in the marketing world, the sell then build strategy, which
Mhm.
essentially means, you build the product to your audience as opposed to building a product and then trying to find an audience.
Right. So where does your existing audience come from today?
So we have a multitude of Facebook groups that we're operating. I have one in Chicago that has about 1,400 realtors in it. So
Mhm.
that's going to be a large portion of our audience. I also run a BPO REO group, which has about 900 people in it. And I believe Mr. Kavanaugh has a group with like 1,200 people too. He used to do sales training and stuff in there. So that's going to be the base of our audience to start. But we're
Okay.
going to be doing some pretty heavy advertising as well. And most of our guests that we're targeting already have an audience as well of
Mhm.
some sort.
Yeah.
So we could tap into their audience and, mutually beneficial.
Yeah, and that's officially called borrowing audiences, which is a great way to build anything, whether it's for a product or a podcast or whatever. So that strategy is a very viable strategy. So you all had a track record before you became partners, and when it comes to dividing up duties, talk a little bit about your strengths as and weaknesses as opposed to Matt's, and then how you. I think this is essential when you are in a partnership. How do you divide the duties, and how do you make the best use of people's skills and what they know how to do, and how do you keep them out of the trenches if it's not their wheelhouse, if they need to not be in that lane? How do you all tell me a little bit about how that works in your business?
Oh, that is such a fantastic question. I really wish Matt was here because he's like the personality type expert and everything like that. And he could really, really dive deep into stuff like this.
Mm,
But are you aware of the book Traction? I believe it's Gene Wickman
yeah,
or Gino Wickman, something like
Gina
that.
Wickman.
Uh-huh. So there's essentially two major roles in a partnership. You have the visionary and you have the integrator. In our particular relationship, Matt is more of the visionary and I'm more of the integrator.
Mhm.
So like what I'm really good at is like if you give me a task, like I'll just figure it out and I'll just do it. Like you don't have to give me instructions. Like go do this. And I'm like, all right, I got it.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah, leave
so
me alone.
and yep, and he's very good at setting the long-term vision and monetizing on the back end. So I'm doing a lot of the front end stuff. I'm doing a lot of recruiting guests for the show and everything like that. And most of the copywriting and things of that nature comes through me. And Matt is kind of setting the broad vision. And, we'll adjust as we go. Lots of micro adjustments
Yeah,
as the
yeah.
entrepreneurship journey goes.
Yeah, I love that. So, how do you take in your partnership, how do you take your strengths and put them over here and say, is that how you do? I'll take these things. You are the implementator, but at the end of the day, you still have certain strengths. And over here, Matt has different strengths. So, how do you put those strengths and into play in your particular parts of your business?
That's a great question. So, I mean, it really highly dependent on what task we're talking about, right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
we'll have a conversation about everything, and we'll talk about our natural skill sets. Is this something that we should be doing? Is this something that would be better if we outsourced it, right? So, when we first started, I was doing a lot of the editing, and it became apparent that it would make a lot more sense to outsource that.
Mhm.
I'm a somewhat capable editor, but I'm not nearly as capable as a professional would be. And if I'm spending 10 hours a week editing, if I was working on real estate activities, I'd be making a lot more money than I'd be saving. So it was a
Mhm.
very easy decision to hire an editor and a content distributor. When we're talking about any other work related task, so Matt is basically a personality expert. He knows all about all of the personality tests. Essentially, his favorite one is the Enneagram test. So he is really good at developing a plan based on people's individual skill sets. So I often lean to Matt. I don't want to say that
Mhm.
he's totally in control of things because we do have a totally collaborative partnership. But in terms of that, I just know that his knowledge is so deep that it's best to just kind of lean into what he already knows instead of trying to pretend like I know what he does.
Well, that's probably a wise decision. Uh,
Mhm.
you've brought up your communication kind of a couple of different ways. Do you all have well, let's go back to when you started. Did you all have a loose communication plan, or did you say, okay, we're going to have a meeting every Monday, every Friday? We're going to make sure we're going to have a defined time that we make sure that we are on the same page, that this arm knows what the other arm is doing. How do you all handle the communication? Because that's where it seems like a lot of people break down. They think the other person knows what they're doing or what they're thinking, or there's just a breakdown in communication over something, which becomes a little problem becomes a big problem.
Absolutely. So I think those little problems only become big problems if you let them, right? So I mean, you're going to
Mhm.
run into problems, especially miscommunication issues, 100% of the time. So it's really a matter of rounding out the corners and making sure to prevent it from happening in the future. So I mean, to answer the question, we don't have a concrete schedule. Like we don't say, oh, we're going to talk every Monday about what we're doing. We talk all day every Friday because we're in the podcast. We have a post podcast thing. And, we're both realtors. So, I mean, we call each other and we both answer pretty much all the time. So, I mean, communication has never been an issue. We do a lot of Facebook Messenger and stuff like that too. So, I mean, we're basically communicating every day, but there's no structure to it.
Okay. So you basically communicate every day. Okay.
Mhm.
Why do you think most partnerships fail?
Oh, what a fantastic question. So,
Now
I
I'm
mean,
going
I
to
think,
put you on the spot with that one.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think the number one thing, like I said before, is the disagreements thing, because disagreements are going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So, I mean, it's a good job to do that right at the front end. Try to identify what disagreements you're going to have and what action plans you'll have once those things come to place. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to predict everything. But I think that is very, very critical. Number two, like we said before, if you don't know the person that you're getting in bed with, that could be a problem. So make sure you
Yeah.
know who they are, and that they're operating at least for me, I refuse to operate with somebody that's not a high integrity individual. I want their reputation to be strong and stable as I want mine to be. So, I mean, that's very, very important. You don't want to get into a business with somebody you don't know well. And I think going back to Gino Wickman, I think you really need to make sure that you have defined roles in figuring out who does what, and having some sort of structure for planning new roles as they develop as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's important. I can tell you're a reader, so I'm a reader, and I'm always looking for good books and good tips. So the podcast is just one thing that you all have a partnership around. What other areas of your business do you all have a partnership around specifically?
Oh, so we work together in a number of factors. So the podcast is the one 50-50 partnership that we
Mhm.
have. Matt is one of the brokers that works underneath me in Illinois. So he gets listings. And in that relationship, it's a totally different role, right? I'm the
Right.
managing broker and he's the agent. Um, we also do a lot of investing together. So Matt is,
Okay.
I believe he's in 12 markets. So, I mean, I'm basically running the Chicago market for him. He gets a lot of stuff under contract for me, and I work on the disposition side for those. So that's another partnership that we have worked out as well.
So you have a multifaceted partnership, then it's not just one thing. That's very interesting. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you like to talk to people about their success journey. Do you do some sort of coaching, or is that you do more of a mentoring thing? How does that work for you?
Well, I wouldn't call it coaching at this point, but I mean, I'm definitely doing coaching as I'm hiring agents. And typically hiring newer agents. So they need a lot of support on the front end. They need to know what to do, how often to do it, when to do it, and things of that nature, right? So, I mean, I'm definitely doing some coaching. Um, the podcast, I mean, the best part about the podcast is it's an amazing way to learn new strategies. It's an amazing way to meet
Mhm.
amazing people like yourself. It is pretty much the best networking tool I've ever found,
Mhm.
because you're not only helping somebody else by bringing the guest on and giving them a platform, but you're meeting people that are high producers, and you're just building a really awesome network at the same time as you're building knowledge at the same time.
Yeah, I love podcasting for that very same reason. I have met so many hundreds of people that I would not have met otherwise. And I've never been on a podcast, I don't believe, where I haven't learned something from the other people. That's the amazing thing. It's a great way to grow your knowledge and to grow your brand. And you mentioned you all being in several different states. What an awesome way to become known through your knowledge on your podcast.
Hmm. Absolutely. And being known is important. I saw a recent experiment done. So they did like an 8x8 postcard campaign. Basically, what they did is they went to a specific subdivision and they asked everybody, they door knocked, and they asked who is the best real estate agent in the area. And you got 20 different answers or whatever. So they just
Mhm.
mailed a postcard for a fake real estate agent, doesn't even exist. The company didn't exist or anything like that. They mailed out 8 weeks of postcards to everybody in that subdivision, and they repeated it And 80% of the people or something like that said that that person was the best real estate agent in the area, and they weren't even real. So yes, I mean, it is, being known is very high on my list of priorities. I think being the most known realtor is far more important than being the best realtor.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Branding is 100% perception, and it's all about marketing. So I like to say marketing is how you get leads, but branding is why they choose you. And you just proved that. And consistency. The consistent person who whether it's marketing with postcards or whatever they're doing, they're going to win every single time. So I can't not talk about marketing, since that's kind of my thing, marketing and branding. So tell me now, I know marketing is different for realtors and than it is for investors. Let's talk about your investor marketing. What do you do along those lines? What are your strategies?
So we have a number of strategies. With Matt, we do a direct mail campaign.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's several layers deep. It's not just one card. You know, we have handwritten cards and then follow-up cards. They're all a little bit different in order to get incoming leads. Incoming leads are the best type of lead because they're already interested and they've already raised their hand like, hey, I want to sell my house. So direct mail, it works. Be consistent, be aggressive. Direct mail works without a doubt. Google AdWords, paid per click, is the best quality lead that I could find, but it's not cheap. You're looking at an ad spend of 300 to 500 bucks a day. But if you could afford that, you should be able to triple that in income as long as you have good systems and processes in place. Those are my two favorite forms of lead generation. There's also Facebook ads. So basically, if we're buying data for our lists, we could make a Facebook lookalike audience based on that data,
Mhm.
excuse me, and we'll target them with Facebook advertising as well. We also do old school prospecting, you know, cold calling, things of that
Mhm.
nature. We used to do a lot of texting, but you know, the TCPAX scares me a little bit, so not so much anymore, or not really at all anymore. Not since I got my managing broker's license, because I just thought that was too much of a liability. But texting works. If you're doing the bulk tests and things like that, you just have to be careful and make sure you're not texting the wrong person.
How does that differ from realtor marketing? What are the major differences, or are there any in the way you do marketing as a realtor?
Fantastic question. So actually, wholesale marketing is my preferred way to get retail leads, because these people that raise their hand, a large percentage of them, they want retail value. So, you know,
Mhm.
instead of just coming at people with one solution to their problem, I come up with 4 or 5 solutions. You know, so we meet at the house. I ask a lot of questions, right? Questions
Mhm.
are the key to sales. If you ask me, if I could define their motivation, if I could define exactly what they want, I could just tailor a solution to them. So that solution will vary based on the party. If they need to sell very quickly, it might be something I'm looking to wholesale or fix or flip. If it's something that they want to get top dollar for, that might be a retail option. If it's something that they're a tired investor or something like that, and they like the cash flow, they're sick of, you know, operating it, that's a good opportunity for seller financing or something like
Mhm.
that. And you know, some people just need like 10 grand and like subject to is the offer for them, you know. So I mean, it's very fluid. I think the more fluid you are in that sales process, the better you will be, and the more solutions you have for people, and the more focused you are on solving their problem as opposed to getting the sale, is kind of my approach.
That is so interesting, because it hasn't been 7 or 8 years ago when having a hybrid model with your mixing up your investing with your realtor business, you being a broker, it was all very murky territory.
Mhm,
There were states like Minneapolis where you just can't do it. You know, if you're in Minnesota,
mhm,
in the Minneapolis area, you just couldn't do it. If you were the investor, you had to be the investor. If you were the realtor, you could not, realtor broker, you could not send out marketing pieces with your name on it. They had very tight laws there. But more and more people that I talk to have adopted this hybrid model, very much like you described. You send out marketing based on maybe getting a wholesale or a distressed property, something like that. And then you look at that lead, and if it's not a candidate for wholesaling flipping, whatever, then you take that lead and you say, well, let me look at it from the retail side, or let me see what type of creative finance I can do. That's so interesting that that's becoming the norm today.
I think it's interesting. And I just think it's a natural evolution too, because as we continue, as people have more access to information, the skill sets of, our competition should increase as our skill sets should be increasing at the same time. So I think that's just the natural evolution of business. As information becomes more widely available, people are going to utilize it. So, I mean, it's really just a matter of really defining the problem, right? Really defining the problem, defining the solution, and then providing a tailor-made solution that is the solution for them.
What do you think was the major determining factor, though, in when it comes to the change in the individual laws, or maybe the realtor associations? Like, I look at the Louisville Board of Realtors where I am. They govern a lot of things here. What changed on that? For you're a broker, so spill. What changed on that front there?
I wish I could speak to other states.
Mhm.
In Illinois, wholesaling is considered a brokerage activity.
Right.
So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense for me to do it because it is by definition a brokerage activity. In other states, it gets a little bit more murky. Unfortunately, I don't know super detailed about them, but I know states like Ohio are very, very particular. You can assign a contract, but you need to be very, very cautious with the way that you market it. And other states, I believe Texas might require a license now too. So every state is just a little bit different. But luckily for me, being a broker in Illinois makes it really easy because it's considered a brokerage activity here.
It's required. Yeah.
Yeah, you need a real estate license. You're allowed to do one in Illinois without a license, but that's also kind of murky too, because technically you can only market one property one time. So one post on Facebook is all you can do.
That's it.
So, there's a lot of people probably in dark water there that don't even know it.
So here in Kentucky, we've not gone down the rabbit hole of having to be licensed, and we don't have the same problems Ohio has. It's pretty much you can do it so long as you follow the rules and don't break any laws, but it's pretty easy here still.
Yeah. So what's really important for me is defining the relationship. And that's to protect my license, essentially.
Right.
So if I'm coming in as a buyer, there's a non-agency clause in every contract that not only is it a part of the contract, but I also write it in the notes. Like, seller's a licensed agent in the state of Illinois. They do not represent you. Please seek, expert guidance in navigating this transaction. So they know that I'm not their agent if we're doing an investment deal. And that is very, very critical. That agency relationship can change though. So, I mean, it's very important to keep it defined and to keep it essentially in writing which direction you're going, because you don't want to confuse the seller and make them feel like you're their agent when you're not. So that is really the biggest mistake people can make when they're trying to do both.
That is something that people should definitely be aware of that are doing both, acting as an agent and an investor, because that can get to be murky waters in the seller's mind. They may perceive it to be one way when you've done nothing really to indicate that it's any other way than above board and this is the way it is, but they don't always maybe see that or take in that information the same way.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's really, like I said, it's a matter of clearly defining the roles that you're in while you're in them. So, I start off every role as a buyer, which means I'm not your agent, but I can be your agent if that's something you want to discuss, right? So, having clearly defined roles is important, and making sure that discussion could be fluid, but, you are in one role before you switch to the other role. And once you switch to the other role, you don't go back.
Yeah, exactly. There's no going back. Well, this has been great information, Tim. I appreciate the fact that you gave up your time to come on the show today. So what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
So you can find me on Facebook. I do a lot of messaging or marketing, on Facebook. So if you message me on Facebook, I'll usually get to that pretty quickly. So that's a very easy way to reach out to me. I am always available. You could call my business line at 630-273-7363. So that's 630-273-7363. And those would be the best ways to reach me.
And also be sure to check out the new podcast that Matt and Tim have, the Freedom Chasers podcast. Having two co-hosts was an interesting way to do a podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Having two people coming at you with questions. So that was fun. So be sure to check it out. And thanks to all the listeners for coming out today. And please please share the show and leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. I would appreciate it. And I will see you all same time, same place next week. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for having me.